The fancy steakhouse buzzed around me as my son Brandon stood up and pointed toward the door. His voice cut through the laughter and clinking glasses. "Mom, this table is for the family. You can wait outside." His wife Ashley smirked. Their friends erupted in laughter. My face burned. The waiter approached nervously, sliding a leather folder in front of me. $3,700. I stared at the number, then at Brandon's smug face. Silence fell. I pushed the bill back across the white tablecloth without a word. I didn't move from my seat. Everyone expected me to slink away, humiliated and obedient, but something inside me had shifted the moment that bill touched the table. I sat back down slowly, folding my hands in my lap. The leather of the booth felt cool against my back. Around me, conversations stuttered and died. Brandon's face flushed red, but I kept my eyes steady on him. My mind drifted back 6 months. To the day, everything started unraveling. It was a Tuesday morning in March when Brandon showed up at my door unannounced. I remember because I was clipping coupons at my kitchen table, trying to stretch my grocery budget another week. My late husband Carl had died 2 years before, and I'd sold his construction business for enough to live modestly. The small condo I'd moved into wasn't much, but it was mine and it was paid for. Brandon looked terrible that morning. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt, the kind of exhaustion that comes from weeks of sleepless nights. Ashley sat in their car at the curb, staring at her phone, not even bothering to come inside. "Mom, we need to talk," Brandon said, and my heart sank. Those words never meant anything good. They came into my tiny living room, and the story spilled out. Their medical device startup, the one Brandon had been so excited about for 3 years, was failing. Not just struggling, dying. They were 90 days from bankruptcy, drowning in debt they couldn't pay. Vendors were threatening lawsuits. Their business partners were jumping ship. The house they'd bought in that exclusive neighborhood, the one with the circular driveway and the 3-car garage, was heading into foreclosure. Ashley was pregnant with their second child. Their daughter Madison was 5 years old, enrolled in a private school that cost more per year than I'd paid for my entire college education. Everything was falling apart. "Mom, you're the only one who can save us," Brandon said, and his voice cracked. "My boy, my only child. The son I'd raised alone after his father walked out when Brandon was 3. I'd worked double shifts as a nurse, put myself through night school, scraped and saved so he could have opportunities I never had. How could I say no? The numbers made my head spin. They needed $250,000 immediately to save the business. Investors who'd promised funding had backed out. The technology was sound, Brandon insisted. They just needed time for the market to catch up, for the right buyers to see the value. Without immediate capital, everything they'd built would vanish. But it wasn't just the business. The house payment was 3 months behind. Another $50,000 would catch them up and prevent foreclosure. Madison's school tuition was due. The lease on Ashley's luxury SUV, the nanny they'd hired when their son Tyler was born. The country club membership Ashley insisted they needed for networking. I looked at the spreadsheet Brandon had prepared. Monthly expenses that made my eyes water. $3,000 for the kids' private school. $900 for Ashley's car. $2,500 for the nanny. $500 for the country club. On and on. "Well, pay you back, Mom," Brandon promised. "Once the business turns around, you'll get every penny. With interest. I swear it." Ashley finally spoke up, her voice flat. "It's an investment in your grandchildren's future. Don't you want them to have stability?" The guilt settled over me like a heavy blanket. What kind of grandmother would I be if I let my grandchildren lose their home? If I let my son's dreams die when I had the means to help? I withdrew the money the next day. $250,000 from the sale of Carl's business. My retirement fund. Carefully saved and invested. Money I'd planned to use for a small house someday. Maybe some travel. It'd never been anywhere beyond a 50-mile radius of our town. I handed Brandon the check, and he hugged me tight. "I love you, Mom. It'll make you proud. I promise." The $50,000 for the house came next. Then the monthly payments started. $3,000 here, $2,000 there. My own budget shrank and shrank. I started buying the cheapest groceries, the store brands and the torn packages marked down for quick sale. My 12-year-old sedan developed a strange rattle, but I couldn't afford to fix it. I wore the same 3 outfits in rotation, washing them by hand to save on the laundromat. But it was worth it. I told myself. Family helps family. This was temporary. Once the business recovered, everything would be fine. Except Brandon stopped returning my calls. When I did reach him, conversations were brief, distracted. Ashley never said thank you. Not once. When I brought meals to their house, she'd take the containers without inviting me in. We're so busy right now, Sherry. I'm sure you understand. She never called me Mom. Always Sherry. Sometimes Eleanor, my middle name, because she thought it sounded more sophisticated. Shed introduced me to her friends as Brandon's mother, in a tone that made it sound like an unfortunate medical condition. The last time I'd tried to talk to Brandon about money was 3 weeks ago. Not about being paid back. I wasn't foolish enough to expect that anymore. Just about maybe reducing what I was sending each month. My savings were nearly gone. Id started picking up weekend shifts at the hospital again, despite being 68 years old and planning to retire fully. Ashley had laughed when I brought it up. Actually laughed. You gave that money freely, Eleanor. Nobody forced you. Don't try to guilt trip us now. Then 2 weeks ago, Brandon called asking for one more favor. Just one more. Could I possibly send $5,000? Some unexpected business expense. Had been vague about the details. Id said yes, even though it meant draining the last of my emergency fund. Now I sat in this restaurant, the Wellington. A place so expensive, they didn't even print prices on the ladies' menus. The kind of place where the waiters wear white gloves and someone comes around offering fresh pepper from a grinder the size of a baseball bat. And Id just learned, from the conversation swirling around me for the past 30 minutes, that Brandon and Ashley had sold their company 3 months ago for $4.2 million. They'd closed the deal, cashed the checks, and never said a word to me. The conversation at the table had been full of congratulations, toasts with champagne that cost $600 a bottle, stories about the negotiation, the all-night sessions with lawyers, the celebration when the papers were signed. 3 months ago, while I was sending them money I couldn't afford, while I was working extra shifts at 68 years old, while I was eating ramen noodles for dinner, they'd bought a vacation home in Aspen, new luxury cars, Ashley had a new diamond ring the size of a marble, and they'd never planned to tell me any of it. I'd only found out about this dinner by accident. I'd driven to their house earlier tonight with homemade lasagna, still playing the role of helpful mother and grandmother. They were climbing into a limousine, dressed like they were going to the Oscars. Brandon had looked panicked when he saw me. It's just a boring work thing, Mom, had stammered. But I'd seen the guilt in his eyes. The way Ashley rolled her eyes and checked her watch with an annoyed sigh, and something in me finally cracked. The Wellington, I'd said. I've never been there. It sounds lovely. The long pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't invited. I wasn't wanted. I was an embarrassment they'd hoped to avoid. Well, I guess you could come along, Brandon had finally muttered, and Ashley's jaw clenched so tight I could hear her teeth grinding. The limousine ride had been 25 minutes of pure tension. Ashley ignored me completely, staring out the window like I didn't exist. Brandon made awkward small talk about the weather. Now here we sat. Brandon had tried to humiliate me in front of a dozen investors and business partners, had told me to wait outside like a dog, had laughed along with everyone else at his own mother. And then that bill came. $3,700 for one dinner, for steaks and champagne and appetizers that cost more than I made in a week. The waiter had assumed I would pay. Of course he had. I was the older woman at the table, clearly not dressed in designer clothes, clearly out of place in this crowd of success and money. I pushed that bill back across the table and looked my son in the eyes, really looked at him, searching for some trace of the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he had nightmares. The teenager Hode hugged me tight when I worked a double shift on his birthday and still made him a cake at midnight. The young man Hood walked across the graduation stage and pointed to me in the audience, mouthing, "Thank you." That person was gone. Or maybe Head never really existed the way I'd imagined him. The waiter stood frozen, the bill in his hands, looking between me and Brandon with growing confusion. Around us, the laughter had died. People were starting to notice the tension. The way Ashley's smile had turned brittle and sharp. One woman at the table, an elegant lady with silver hair and kind eyes, leaned forward. "Brandon, is this your mother? Aren't you going to introduce us?" Her name tag said Patricia. Some kind of investor or business partner. based on the earlier conversations. Brandon cleared his throat. Oh, yeah. This is Cherry. Mom, these are our investors and partners. Ashley cut in, her voice like ice. She was just leaving, actually. Weren't you, Cherry? I felt something shift in my chest. A locked door that had been closed for years suddenly swinging open. A voice I'd silenced for too long finally finding its volume. No, I said quietly. I don't think I was. The silence that followed my simple refusal felt enormous. Ashley's perfectly made-up face registered first shock, then fury. Brandon's eyes darted around the table, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Patricia, the silver-haired investor, was watching me with open curiosity now. Her expression had shifted from polite confusion to something sharper, more interested. She'd sensed the undercurrent at this table, the toxic family dynamic playing out in real time. Ashley leaned close to Brandon, whispering with the kind of angry hiss that carries further than people think. I told you not to tell her about tonight, Brandon hissed back. She showed up at the house right when we were leaving. What was I supposed to do? So it'd been right. This dinner, this celebration, was something I was never meant to know about. They'd planned this evening carefully, invited all these important people, arranged for a limousine and champagne and toasts, and I was supposed to be sitting in my shabby little condo, eating store-brand soup, with no idea that my son had become a millionaire. My mind went back to that moment outside their house, 3 hours earlier. I'd been so proud of that lasagna. I'd used the last of my good mozzarella, the expensive kind, because I wanted to do something nice. I'd imagined dropping it off, maybe being invited in for a cup of coffee with my grandchildren. Madison was supposed to have a dance recital coming up. I'd been saving money to buy her flowers. Instead, I'd found them dressed for a gala. Brandon in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Ashley in a gown that shimmered under the porch light, with jewelry that caught the sun and threw rainbows across the driveway. Oh, we're just meeting some business associates, Brandon had said, barely looking at me. But I'd known something was wrong. You don't wear a tuxedo to a casual business dinner. You don't hire a limousine with a uniformed driver. You don't have that particular glow of excitement mixed with nerves. At 7 on a Saturday night, I'd asked, dressed like that. Ashley had been furious at being caught. I'd seen it in the way her jaw clenched, the way her fingers tightened on her clutch purse. It's at the Wellington. Brandon. We're late. The Wellington. Even I knew that name. It was in all the society pages, the place where important people celebrated important occasions. Engagements of senators, daughters, retirement parties for CEOs, the kind of place that required reservations months in advance. Brandon had looked trapped, glancing between me and Ashley like a man caught between two predators. The paws stretched out awkwardly. Ashley's foot had been tapping with impatience. Well, I guess you could come along, Brandon had finally said. The words dragged out of him reluctantly. But Mom, seriously, it's just dull business talk. The lie had been so transparent, and Ashley's face had gone through such a range of emotions. Anger, disbelief, resignation. Shed climbed into the limo without another word, slamming the door hard enough to make the driver wince. The 20-minute ride had been excruciating. I'd tried to make conversation, asked about the kids, about the business, about their plans for the summer. Ashley had stared out the tinted windows like I was invisible. Brandon had given one-word answers, checking his phone every 30 seconds. When Wed arrived at the Wellington, with its gleaming glass entrance and valet parking and doormen in actual top hats, I'd felt a flutter of nervousness. My dress was from a discount store, bought 3 years ago. My shoes were comfortable, but scuffed. My purse was practical, not designer. Ashley had walked 3 steps ahead of us, as if trying to establish that she wasn't with me. Brandon had at least offered me his arm, but his body had been tense, his smile forced. Inside, the restaurant was even more intimidating. Crystal chandeliers that looked like they cost more than a house. Tables set with what had to be real silver, not the stainless steel I was used to. Wine glasses the size of fish bowls. Everything gleamed and sparkled and whispered expensive. The hostess had led us to a large private table, already occupied by well-dressed people drinking cocktails and laughing. These were Brandon's investors, his business partners, his new world of money and success. And I'd spent the next 30 minutes being invisible. People had glanced at me with polite confusion. clearly wondering who I was and why I was there. Ashley had made no effort to introduce me. Brandon had mumbled something vague when directly asked, then changed the subject. I'd listened to them talk about the sale of the company, the acquisition deal, the millions of dollars that had changed hands. I'd heard about the negotiations, the lawyers, the moment when the contracts were signed. 3 months ago, in August. While I'd been working weekend shifts and sending them money I couldn't afford to lose, they'd talked about their new purchases. Ashley had shown off her ring, telling everyone about the jeweler who'd designed it custom. Another woman had congratulated them on the Aspen property, saying she'd seen photos on social media and it looked stunning. We're planning a European vacation next spring, Ashley had said, her voice bright with excitement. 3 weeks. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. We're taking the children. It's important for them to experience different cultures. 3 weeks in Europe, while I was eating ramen and wondering how I'd afford my blood pressure medication next month. Brandon had noticed me listening. For just a second, our eyes had met, and I'd seen something there. Shame? Guilt? But then Head looked away and ordered another bottle of champagne. That's when Head stood up. That's when Head said those words that would change everything between us forever. Mom, this table is for the family. You can wait outside. Like I wasn't family. Like I was some stranger who'd wandered in off the street. Like the woman who'd given birth to him, raised him alone, sacrificed everything for him. Was an embarrassment to be removed. The laughter from his friends had been the worst part. They'd thought it was funny, some kind of joke. Look at Brandon, putting his awkward mother in her place. How amusing. But Patricia hadn't laughed. I'd noticed that. Shed watched the whole scene with a frown, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. Now, as I sat here refusing to leave, refusing to be dismissed, Patricia set down her wine glass with a definitive click. Brandon, she said, her voice carrying authority. I was reviewing the original cap table from when we first invested. I noticed there was a large angel investment from an E.C. Thompson. That was quite a significant sum. The table went quiet. Brandon's face drained of color. Oh, that was just an early supporter, he said, his voice strangled. Patricia's eyes were sharp. $300,000 is quite a vote of confidence. Is E.C. Thompson here tonight? The silence stretched out. I felt every eye at the table turn toward me. My maiden name was Thompson. Eleanor Cherry Thompson. I'd used my full legal name on all the investment paperwork Brandon had asked me to sign. Paperwork I hadn't fully understood. Paperwork Head rushed me through, saying it was just a formality, just a loan to the business that would be paid back with interest. But it wasn't a loan, was it? Patricia was looking at me now, her gaze steady and knowing. Eleanor Cherry Thompson. I nodded slowly. My mouth felt dry. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. You're the angel investor, Patricia said, the one who made this whole thing possible. Brandon moved fast, trying to control the damage. He laughed, but it came out forced and nervous. Mom didn't understand business. We were helping her invest her money properly. It was better than just sitting in a savings account. Patricia didn't look convinced. She was watching me, not Brandon, and I could see her mind working through the implications. Around the table, other investors were starting to pay attention. The celebration atmosphere had completely evaporated. Helping her, Patricia said slowly. According to my records, that $300,000 came in at a critical moment. You were 90 days from bankruptcy when that investment arrived. Without that capital injection, there would be no company to sell. She turned to me, her expression gentle but direct. Miss Thompson, did you understand that you were purchasing equity in the company? That you owned a stake in the business? I felt my face flush hot. Equity. Stake. The words Brandon had used when Head rushed me through the paperwork had been different. Softer. Head talked about helping, about family support, about getting paid back once things turned around. I said carefully, my voice shaking slightly, that I was loaning Brandon money to save his business. Ashley jumped in, her voice sharp. She was happy to help her son. It's what mothers do. She didn't need to understand every technical detail, but Patricia was still watching me, and her frown had deepened. Miss Thompson, when the sale was finalized, were you notified? Were you part of the negotiations? The answer must have been clear on my face, because Patricia's expression hardened. She turned to Brandon, and her voice dropped to something cold and professional. What percentage did she hold? Brandon shifted in his seat. Mom, let's not talk business at dinner. What percentage, Brandon? Patricia repeated. And this time it wasn't a request. The other investors were fully engaged now. A man in an expensive suit leaned forward. Someone else set down their fork with a clatter. The waiter, still hovering nervously with the unpaid bill, took a step backward. I reached into my purse. My hands were shaking, but I managed to pull out the folder I'd been carrying for the past week. Ever since I'd seen that new Porsche in Brandon and Ashley's driveway, the one they'd lied about, claiming it was a rental for some business event. That lie had been the catalyst. That obvious, stupid lie. Because I'd driven past their house the next day and the Porsche was still there, and the day after that. And I'd realized that if they were lying about a car, what else were they lying about? So I'd dug out all my paperwork, every check I'd written, every bank transfer, every document Brandon had asked me to sign. I'd gone through it all, spread it out on my kitchen table, and really looked at it for the first time. Then I'd called a lawyer, Douglas Harper. I'd found his name in the phone book, called his office, been told he was too expensive for me, but I'd insisted on a consultation, just 30 minutes. I'd used the last of my credit card to pay for it, and Douglas Harper had taken one look at my paperwork and gone very, very quiet. Miss Thompson, Head said finally, do you understand what you actually signed? Now I opened the folder on the restaurant table. Inside were copies of everything. The original investment agreement, the articles of incorporation showing my ownership stake, bank statements showing every check, every transfer, text messages from Brandon promising to pay me back, emails where I'd asked about the business and been shut out. And there, highlighted in yellow, was the number that mattered. 18%. My $300,000 investment had purchased 18% of the company. Patricia took the folder and began reading. Her eyebrows rose higher with each page. Other investors craned their necks to see. The man in the expensive suit stood up and came around to look over Patricia's shoulder. Brandon, Patricia said quietly. Miss Thompson owned 18% of your company. Her share of a $4.2 million sale would be approximately $756,000. Did you notify her of the sale? Brandon's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No sound came out. Ashley recovered first. This is ridiculous. You're ruining our celebration. This is harassment. But Patricia was still reading. Flipping through pages. She stopped on one document, and her face went pale. There's an email here, she said, looking at Brandon. From you to Ashley. Dated 3 weeks after the sale closed. She read aloud. Mom keeps asking about the business. We need to keep her in the dark about the acquisition. Once we have the lawyer draw up the gift documents, we can get her to sign and make this go away. The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone at the table stared at Brandon. Even the waiter was frozen in place, his eyes wide. Gift documents, Patricia said, her voice deadly quiet. You were planning to retroactively classify her equity investment as a gift. My hands were shaking as I pulled out another paper. This one I'd only gotten yesterday, from Douglas Harper's office. I filed a lawsuit on Thursday, I said, my voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying in the shocked silence, for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and recovery of my equity share. The papers will be served on Monday. Brandon's face had gone from white to red. Mom, what are you doing? This is insane. No, I said, and my voice was stronger now. What's insane is thinking you could steal from me and I'd never notice. What's insane is treating your mother like garbage while spending money that partly belongs to her. You gave that money freely. Ashley practically shouted. Nobody forced you. I invested that money in my son's business. I corrected her. And you both committed fraud by hiding the sale and trying to cheat me out of my rightful share. Patricia closed the folder and looked at Brandon with something like disgust. The acquisition contract has a morals clause and a fraud provision. If you misrepresented ownership or engaged in financial misconduct, the deal could be voided. Another investor spoke up, the man in the expensive suit. His name was Gerald. I'd learned from the earlier conversation. I reviewed the due diligence documents personally. There was no mention of ongoing legal disputes or equity disagreements. There was no dispute, Brandon said desperately. This is my mother overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. Patricia stood up slowly. When she spoke, Every word was precise and cutting. Your mother, who provided the seed funding that saved your company when you were 90 days from bankruptcy. Your mother, who you publicly humiliated tonight by telling her to wait outside. Your mother, who you defrauded of nearly $750,000. That mother. She pulled out her phone. Right there at the table, she made a call. James? It's Patricia. We have a problem with the Wellington acquisition. I need you to halt the remaining payment transfers immediately. Yes, right now. There's been potential fraud in the equity disclosure. Brandon lunged across the table. No! You can't do that. Patricia held up one finger, still on the phone. James, I'm going to send you some documentation. The seller may have deliberately hidden a major equity stakeholder from due diligence. Yes, I am serious. No, I don't think this can wait until Monday. She hung up and looked at Brandon. That was James Morrison, CEO of the company that acquired your business. Until we sort this out, the remaining payments from the acquisition are frozen. What remaining payments? I asked, confused. Gerald answered, his voice flat with disapproval. Standard acquisition structure. They received $1.4 million at closing. The remaining $2.8 million comes in installments over 2 years, contingent on no material misrepresentations and no legal complications. $2.8 million. Frozen. Because of me. Brandon was standing now, his hands pressed flat on the table. Mom, please. You're destroying everything. We have contracts, obligations. You can't just come in here and blow up my life. You blew up your own life, Patricia said coldly, the moment you decided to commit fraud. She turned to the other investors. In withdrawing from any future ventures with Mr. Walker, I suggest you all consider doing the same. One by one, the other investors stood. Some threw their napkins on their plates with disgust. Others simply walked away without a word. Gerald paused next to me. Miss Thompson, if you need expert witnesses for your lawsuit, call me. I'll testify to the timing of your investment and its critical nature. He dropped a business card beside my plate. Within 5 minutes, the table had emptied. Only Brandon, Ashley, and I remained, along with the increasingly nervous waiter and the restaurant manager who'd appeared from somewhere. The manager cleared his throat. I apologize for interrupting, but there's still the matter of the bill. He gestured to the leather folder, still sitting in the middle of the table. $3,700. Brandon reached for his wallet, pulled out a credit card, handed it over. The manager disappeared, returned 2 minutes later with an uncomfortable expression. Sir, this card has been declined. Do you have another form of payment? I watched as Brandon tried 3 more cards. Each one came back declined. His spending spree on vacation homes and luxury cars and designer jewelry had maxed out everything. He had no available credit. And with the acquisition payments frozen, he had no immediate cash coming in. He turned to me, his face desperate. Mom, can you just cover this? I'll pay you back, I swear. Just this once. I stood up, gathered my purse and my folder, looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed everything for. No, Brandon, I said quietly. I can't, and I won't. Not ever again. I walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Ashley's voice rising in panic. The manager's firm insistence on payment. Brandon's desperate attempts to negotiate. I kept walking. The night air hit my face like cold water as I stepped outside the Wellington. My legs felt shaky, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Behind me, through the restaurant's tall windows, I could see Brandon and Ashley still arguing with the manager. The elegant dinner, the celebration, had turned into a nightmare of their own making. I made it to my car, that old 12-year-old sedan with the rattling engine, got inside and locked the doors. Then I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, and started to shake. What had I just done? For a moment, doubt crashed over me. Brandon was my son, my only child. Had I really just destroyed his business deal? Humiliated him in front of his colleagues? Started a lawsuit that might bankrupt him? Then I remembered his words. This table is for the family. You can wait outside. I remembered $3,700. I remembered 18 months of sending money I couldn't afford. I remembered working double shifts at 68 years old while he bought vacation homes and Porsches. I remembered being treated like I was nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Miss Thompson, this is Patricia Morrison. I got your number from the investment documents. Would you have a moment to talk? Patricia, the investor who'd stood up for me. I texted back yes, and within seconds my phone was ringing. Miss Thompson, Patricia said without preamble. I want to apologize. I had no idea Brandon was capable of this. Our due diligence clearly wasn't thorough enough. It's not your fault, I managed to say. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, stronger than I expected. I've been in business for 30 years, Patricia said. I've seen a lot of ugly behavior, but what your son did tonight, that was beyond the pale. She paused. I lost my own mother last year. We'd been estranged for 5 years because I put my career before family. I said terrible things to her. By the time I realized what mattered, it was too late to apologize. I heard her take a breath. Seeing how Brandon treated you tonight made me sick. You deserved so much better, and I want to help, if you'll let me. We talked for 20 minutes. Patricia explained that she'd already sent all my documents to James Morrison, the CEO of the acquiring company. They were taking the fraud allegations very seriously. The morals clause in the acquisition contract was ironclad. If Brandon had deliberately hidden a major equity stakeholder, the entire deal could be voided. They'll likely want to settle with you directly, Patricia said. To avoid the scandal and the legal costs. You'll get what you're owed, probably more. And I'll testify in your lawsuit if you need me to. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time. The restaurant was closing down for the night. I saw Brandon and Ashley finally leave. Not in their limousine, but in a taxi. Ashley's face was streaked with mascara. Brandon looked 10 years older. I drove home slowly, my old sedan rattling over every bump. My condo was dark and cold. I'd turned the heat down to save money. The refrigerator hummed in the silence. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd clipped coupons that morning a lifetime ago. On Monday, everything moved fast. Douglas Harper called me at 8 in the morning. Brandon had been served with the lawsuit at his office. According to Harper's investigator, Brandon had immediately called an emergency meeting with his own lawyers. He's panicking, Harper said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Good. Panic makes people sloppy. By noon, Harper called again. The acquiring company wanted to meet. They were prepared to discuss a settlement. Could I come to Harper's office on Wednesday? Tuesday evening, Brandon showed up at my condo. I almost didn't answer the door. But something made me look through the peephole. And what I saw shocked me. Brandon looked terrible. He hadn't shaved. His expensive suit was wrinkled like he'd slept in it. His eyes were red-rimmed. When I opened the door, he tried to push past me. But I stood my ground. You can say what you need to say from there, I told him. Mom. Please. His voice cracked. You're destroying my life. No, Brandon. You destroyed your own life. I'm just refusing to keep financing it. He tried tears. When that didn't work, he tried anger, raising his voice, accusing me of being selfish and vindictive. When that didn't work, he tried bargaining. What do you want? Money? I'll get you the money. Just drop the lawsuit. Please. It's not about the money, I said, and I meant it. It's about respect. About being treated like I mattered. Like I was a person, not just a wallet. You do matter. Then why did you tell me to wait outside? Why did you exclude me from your celebration? Why did you try to steal from me? He had no answer, just stood there in my doorway, this man eyed raised, and I barely recognized him. I want you to leave now, I said. Mom, please, Ashley is pregnant again. We need that acquisition money. We've got mortgage payments, car payments. We need it. And there it was. Even now, even after everything, he only cared about the money. Not about what had done to me. Not about the betrayal or the cruelty. Just about how my actions were affecting his bank account. I closed the door in his face. Wednesday's meeting at Harper's office was surreal. The acquiring company's lawyers were there, along with their CEO, James Morrison. He was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Miss Thompson, he said, I want to apologize on behalf of my company. We should have done better due diligence. We should have uncovered your equity stake. Harper laid out the settlement terms. The acquiring company would pay me my full equity share, $756,000. They'd also pay an additional $200,000 as a settlement to avoid protracted litigation and bad publicity. Nearly $1 million total. In return, I'd sign a confidentiality agreement and release them from any further claims. "There's one more thing you should know," James Morrison said. "We're canceling the acquisition. Mr. Walker's fraud makes this too risky for us. He'll have to return the $1.4 million he's already received." My heart stopped. "Return it? Hess spent most of it." "I know," Morrison said grimly. "That's his problem, not ours. The contract is clear. Material misrepresentation voids the deal. He has 30 days to return the funds, or we'll sue for breach of contract." Brandon was going to be ruined, completely, utterly destroyed. The vacation home he couldn't afford, the cars, the jewelry, all bought with money he now had to return. Money he'd already spent. "Will he go to jail?" I asked. Harper shook his head. "Probably not. This is civil, not criminal. But hell, likely have to declare bankruptcy. Lose the house, the cars, everything." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired and sad. But I signed the papers. All of them. That night, Harper called with one more piece of news. "The IRS investigation is moving forward. Brandon claimed your gifts as business expenses and took tax deductions. But they weren't gifts. They were investments. That's tax fraud." I gave them all the documentation this morning. "What will happen?" I asked. "Fines, definitely. Possibly criminal charges, though that's less certain. Depends on how egregious the IRS thinks it is." I hung up and looked around my shabby little condo. In a few weeks, it'd have almost $1 million. I could move, buy a small house, travel, actually retire instead of working myself into an early grave. I should have been happy. But all I could think about was Brandon as a little boy, climbing into my lap after a nightmare, trusting me to keep him safe. Where had I gone wrong? When had helping him become enabling him? When had love turned into something toxic that hurt us both? I didn't have answers, just questions that kept me up at night. The next few weeks were strange and disorienting. The settlement money arrived in my account, and for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't worried about every penny. I paid off my credit cards, got my car fixed, bought groceries without checking the price of every item. But I felt hollow. Brandon had called me 63 times in the first week. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that started angry, turned desperate, ended with sobbing apologies. I listened to each one once, then deleted them. Ashley sent a letter. Not an apology. A demand that I drop the lawsuit for the sake of the children. She wrote that my selfishness was destroying Madison and Tyler's future. That I was a terrible grandmother. That she hoped I could live with myself. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to my bank and set up 2 separate 529 college savings accounts, $50,000 in each one. For Madison and Tyler. With strict terms, Brandon and Ashley couldn't touch the money. It would go directly to the children when they turned 18, paid straight to their colleges. I had the bank send notification letters to the children's schools, copies to Brandon and Ashley. This was my gift to my grandchildren, not to their parents. The kids would get an education no matter what happened with their father's bankruptcy. The IRS investigation concluded faster than I expected. Brandon was fined $83,000 for fraudulent deductions. No criminal charges, but the financial hit was devastating on top of everything else. The foreclosure on their big house went through. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Brandon and Ashley had moved to a small rental in a less expensive neighborhood. The vacation home in Aspen was repossessed. The Porsche, Ashley's SUV, all gone. They were driving a used minivan now. Brandon got a job. A real job, working as a sales manager for a medical supply company. Not running his own startup, not being a big-shot entrepreneur. Just regular work with a regular paycheck. It should have made me happy. It didn't. It just made me sad. I took some of my settlement money and signed up for an Alaskan cruise I'd dreamed about for years. 10 days sailing up the coast, seeing glaciers and wildlife. Carl had always promised we'd go someday, but someday never came. I went alone. It was magnificent and lonely and healing all at once. When I got back, I bought a new car. Nothing fancy. Just a reliable sedan that didn't rattle and had working air conditioning. I moved to a nicer apartment, one with a view of the park where I could watch children playing and remember when Brandon was young and uncomplicated. 3 months after that night at the Wellington, I ran into Patricia at a coffee shop. We'd kept in touch, occasional emails and texts. She suggested lunch, and I said yes. We met at a small cafe I'd grown to love, nothing like the Wellington. Just good sandwiches and honest coffee. Patricia looked well, relaxed in a way she hadn't at that formal dinner. You look different, she said as we sat down. Lighter somehow. I felt lighter. The weight of constant worry had lifted. I wasn't rich, but I was secure. I could sleep at night without wondering how I'd pay next month's bills. I heard about Brandon, Patricia said carefully. The bankruptcy, the job. How are you feeling about all that? Conflicted, I admitted. Hez my son. I don't enjoy seeing him suffer, but I also think maybe this is what he needed. To learn that actions have consequences, that you can't just take and take without eventually having to pay it back. Patricia nodded. My therapist says that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is let people face the results of their choices, not rescue them from the consequences they created. We talked for 2 hours about our lives, our regrets, our hopes. Patricia told me about her mother, the years of estrangement, the guilt she still carried. Don't wait too long, I told her. Brandon and I, we may never repair this, but if there's a chance with someone you love, take it. A week later, I received a letter. Not from Ashley this time. From Brandon. Handwritten, 3 pages long, on plain notebook paper. It started with an apology. A real one. Not "I'm sorry if you were hurt," or "I'm sorry you felt that way." Just "I'm sorry. I was wrong." He wrote about losing everything. The house, the cars, the lifestyle they'd built. How terrifying it was. How humiliating. But also how it had forced him to look at himself clearly for the first time in years. I became someone I don't recognize, he wrote. Someone who would humiliate his own mother for a laugh. Someone who would steal from the person who loved him most. I don't know how I became that person, but I did. He wrote about his new job. How strange it felt to have a boss, to work for someone else, to not be the big-shot entrepreneur, but also how it had given him perspective. I come home exhausted now. Like you used to when I was a kid. I remember you working double shifts, coming home with your feet aching, and still making me dinner and helping with my homework. I never appreciated that. I never understood how hard you worked just to give me a better life. He wrote about Ashley, about their marriage struggles, about couples therapy they'd started, about how losing everything had actually brought them closer in some ways, forced them to figure out what really mattered. The kids are adjusting, he wrote. Madison asked why we moved, why we don't have the big house anymore. I told her the truth, that Daddy made mistakes and now we have to fix them. She asked if you were mad at me. I said yes, probably. She said she misses you. She asked if you were still her grandma. I told her you always would be. The last paragraph made me cry. I don't expect forgiveness, Mom. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I finally understand what you tried to teach me my whole life. That character matters more than success. That integrity is priceless. That how you treat people, especially the people who love you, defines who you are. I'm proud to be your son. I just wish I'd acted like it sooner. I love you. I'm sorry. Brandon. I read that letter 5 times. Cried through each reading. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to respond. Maybe I never would be. But I kept the letter. That had to mean something. Spring arrived slowly that year. Patches of green pushing through the last snow. I'd lived through a winter of transformation, and now everything felt new and uncertain and full of possibility. Patricia and I had become genuine friends. We met for coffee twice a week, went to movies, took a weekend trip to a nearby state park. Shed reconciled with her estranged daughter, and watching their careful, hopeful rebuilding of relationship gave me something to think about. It's not easy, Patricia told me over coffee one morning. Sarah and I, we're still figuring out how to trust each other again. But we're trying. That counts for something. I told her about Brandon's letter. She listened carefully. Didn't rush to give advice. What do you want to do? She finally asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to forgive him, to try to rebuild. Hez my son. But part of me is terrified of going back to how things were, of being taken advantage of again. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Patricia said. It doesn't mean no boundaries. You can forgive someone and still protect yourself. That stuck with me. I'd started volunteering at a women's financial literacy program downtown, teaching classes on budgeting, understanding investments, recognizing financial abuse. I'd told my story, anonymously, and the response had been overwhelming. So many women had lived through similar experiences, Not always with children, sometimes with spouses or partners or parents. But the pattern was the same. Love weaponized into obligation, generosity twisted into exploitation. Your value isn't in what you give, I told my students. It's in who you are. One afternoon, I was leaving a class when I saw something that made me stop. In the parking lot, a young woman was arguing with a man I assumed was her son. He was in his 20s, angry, aggressive. She was crying, fumbling in her purse. "You owe me this, Mom," he was shouting. After everything I've been through, I stood there, frozen, watching my own story play out in front of me. The woman pulled out cash, handed it over with shaking hands. The young man snatched it and stormed off without a thank you or goodbye. The woman sagged against her car, sobbing. I walked over before I could overthink it. "Excuse me." I couldn't help but notice. "Are you okay?" She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm fine. Just family stuff." "I've been where you are," I said gently. I pulled out a card from the financial literacy program. "We can help, if you want it." She took the card like it was a lifeline, stared at it for a long moment. "I don't know how to say no to him," she whispered. "He's my son." "I know," I said, "but you deserve better than this. And honestly, so does he. You're not helping him by enabling his behavior. You're just teaching him that he can treat you terribly and still get what he wants." We stood there in the parking lot for 20 minutes. I told her about Brandon, about the Wellington, about the lawsuit and the settlement, and the long, hard road to standing up for myself. "It gets better," I promised her. "But only if you choose yourself, only if you set boundaries and stick to them." She was still clutching my card when we parted. I didn't know if she'd call, if she'd come to the program, if anything would change for her. But I'd planted a seed. Sometimes that's all you can do. Driving home, I thought about Brandon's letter, about Madison asking if I was still her grandma, about the college funds I'd set up, my way of helping without enabling. Maybe it was time, not to go back to how things were. Never that, but maybe to take one small step forward. I called Douglas Harper. "If Brandon wants to arrange supervised visits with the grandchildren, I'm open to that, through a mediator, with clear boundaries about money and respect." Harper was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure? You don't owe him this." "I'm not doing it for him," I said. "I'm doing it for Madison and Tyler. They're innocent in all this. And maybe, with time and real change, for myself. I'm not promising reconciliation. Just a crack in the door. He'll have to prove he deserves more." 2 weeks later, I met Madison and Tyler at a park. A family therapist was there as a mediator. Brandon and Ashley waited in their car, not allowed to approach unless invited. Madison ran to me and threw her arms around my waist. "Grandma, I missed you so much." Tyler, only 3 years old, was shyer, but he took my hand and showed me the bug's head found under a rock. We played for an hour, fed ducks at the pond, pushed swings, laughed together. Brandon watched from the car. When it was time to leave, I walked over. He rolled down the window, and I could see he'd been crying. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "Thank you for giving me a chance to make this right." "This isn't for you," I said firmly. "This is for them. You want more than supervised visits? You want a relationship with me again? You earn it, through actions, not words, through consistency, not promises. Prove to me that you've changed. Prove that I matter to you as a person, not a bank account." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I will. I swear, Mom. I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if I have to." "Maybe you will," I said. "Or maybe you won't. Either way, I'm going to be okay. That's what I've learned. I'm going to be okay whether you change or not, because my happiness doesn't depend on you anymore. I'm enough all by myself." I walked back to my car, got in, drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw Brandon standing in the parking lot, watching me leave. For the first time in my life, walking away from him didn't break my heart. It felt like freedom. 6 months had passed since that afternoon in the park. Summer had given way to fall, and the trees outside my apartment window were dressed in gold and crimson. I sat in my favorite chair, a real luxury I'd bought for myself, with a cup of coffee and a view that never got old. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Lunch today? That cafe we love." I smiled and texted back, "Yes." The cafe had become our place, mine and Patricia's. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. Just honest food and good company. When I arrived, she was already there, and her face lit up when she saw me. "You're glowing," she said as I sat down. "What's your secret?" "No secret," I said. "Just peace. Actual, genuine peace." And it was true. I'd used part of my settlement money to take that Alaskan cruise, and it had been everything I'd dreamed. I'd seen glaciers calving into the sea, watched whales breach in the distance, stood on the deck at midnight under the northern lights. I'd done it alone and loved every minute. I'd bought my reliable new car, moved to my apartment with the park view. But most of the money was invested sensibly, growing steadily, ensuring I'd never have to work myself into exhaustion again. I'd fully retired from nursing. Now I spent my time volunteering at the financial literacy program, teaching women about boundaries and self-worth, and recognizing when love became exploitation. "Any word from Brandon?" Patricia asked carefully. She always asked, always cared, never pushed. "We had another supervised visit last week," I said. "Madison is doing great. She's in 2nd grade now, loving school. Tyler is talking more, opening up. They're good kids. And Brandon." I thought about how to answer. Brandon and I had a long road ahead, if we had a road at all. The supervised visits continued every 2 weeks. He was always respectful, always on time, always appropriate. Head kept his job. Was getting promoted, actually. He and Ashley were making it work, living within their means, learning to be content with enough instead of always wanting more. 3 months ago, Head sent another letter, shorter this time, just checking in, telling me about his life without asking for anything. No requests for money, no emotional manipulation. Just updates, like you might send to a distant relative. Last month, Head asked if we could have coffee sometime. Just the two of us, still with the mediator present if I wanted. I'd said maybe, someday. Not yet. He's trying, I told Patricia. Whether he's really changing or just going through the motions, time will tell. But here's what I've learned. It doesn't actually matter. Patricia raised her eyebrows. Doesn't matter. It matters for him, for his own growth. I clarified. But it doesn't matter for my happiness. I spent so many years tying my worth to whether Brandon appreciated me, whether he loved me the right way, whether I was being a good enough mother. Now, I know my worth has nothing to do with him. I'm valuable because I exist, because I'm kind and generous and strong, not because of what I can give someone else. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's beautiful. And hard-won. The hardest thing I ever learned, I agreed. We ordered lunch and talked about everything and nothing. Patricia's daughter Sarah was getting married in the spring. Patricia had been invited, asked to help plan, welcomed back into her daughter's life. Their relationship was still healing, still careful, but it was real. "I keep thinking about that night at the Wellington," Patricia said as we finished our sandwiches. "How everything changed in one moment. How you pushed that bill back across the table and refused to be dismissed. I remembered it too. The weight of that leather folder. The silence when I slid it away. The look on Brandon's face. It was the scariest thing I'd ever done," I admitted. In that moment, I was risking everything. My relationship with my son, my connection to my grandchildren, everything I'd worked for. But I realized that what I'd been working for was killing me. I was destroying myself trying to buy love that should have been freely given. "You saved yourself," Patricia said. "And maybe you saved Brandon too." He had to hit bottom to find solid ground. I'd thought about that a lot. Whether my actions had been cruel or kind, whether it'd helped or hurt. The guilt had been enormous at first, watching Brandon lose everything, knowing I'd set those dominoes in motion. But Douglas Harper had reminded me, "You didn't make Brandon lie. You didn't make him commit fraud. You didn't make him humiliate you in public. He made those choices. You just refused to keep covering for them." And he was right. Brandon had spent years making choices that hurt people, including himself. It enabled those choices by always being there to catch him, to bail him out, to make everything okay. By taking that away, it forced him to face reality. Maybe for the first time in his adult life. "Have you forgiven him?" Patricia asked. "I'm working on it," I said honestly. Forgiveness is a process, not a moment. Some days I feel it more than others. But I've forgiven myself, and that's what really matters. Forgiven yourself for what? For all those years of putting everyone else first. For teaching Brandon that my needs didn't matter. For confusing self-sacrifice with love. I smiled. I'm learning that real love has boundaries. That saying no can be the most loving thing you do. That you can't actually help someone by enabling their worst behavior. After lunch, we walked through the park. The leaves crunched under our feet. Children played on the playground, their laughter bright and carefree. I watched them and thought about Madison and Tyler, about the college funds that would give them opportunities regardless of their parents' finances. I started something new, I told Patricia. A support group for women dealing with financial abuse from family members. We meet twice a month. How's it going? It's breaking my heart and healing it at the same time, I said. So many women dealing with adult children who take advantage, with partners who steal, with parents who guilt and manipulate. They all think they're alone, that they're being unreasonable, that love means never saying no. What do you tell them? The same thing someone should have told me years ago. That love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling. That you can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. That you teach people how to treat you. And if you accept terrible treatment, you're teaching them it's okay. We stopped at a bench, sat down in the autumn sunshine. I felt the warmth on my face and closed my eyes. I'm 69 years old, I said. For 68 of those years, I measured my worth by what I could do for others. How much I could give. How much I could sacrifice. How much I could endure. I thought that was love. I thought that was being a good person. And now I know that I'm valuable just because I'm here. That I deserve respect and kindness and consideration. That people who really love me don't make me feel small or worthless or invisible. They don't measure my value by my bank account. I opened my eyes and looked at Patricia. That night at the Wellington, when Brandon told me to wait outside, when everyone laughed, I had a choice. I could swallow my humiliation, pretend it didn't hurt, keep enabling his cruelty, or I could stand up for myself, even if it meant losing him. You chose yourself, Patricia said. I chose dignity. I corrected. I chose truth. I chose to stop participating in my own diminishment. And yes, it cost me. It cost me dearly. But what I gained was worth more than anything I lost. As we walked back to our cars, I thought about that young woman in the parking lot. The one I'd given my card to, months ago. She'd come to the program, to my support group. She'd set boundaries with her son, cut off the endless flow of money she couldn't afford. Had been furious at first, threatened to cut her out of his life and her grandchildren's lives. But Shed held firm. And slowly, grudgingly, Head started to change. Started getting his life together. Started treating her with a shred of respect. I'm not saying it's perfect, Shed told the group last week. We're not close like we used to be. Maybe we never will be again. But I can look at myself in the mirror now. I can respect the woman I see. That was everything. That was the whole journey distilled to one truth. You have to be able to respect yourself. That evening, I was home making dinner when my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole, surprised to see Madison standing there with Ashley. This wasn't a scheduled visit. I opened the door cautiously. Is everything okay? Ashley looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot. Madison wanted to bring you something. For your birthday. My birthday. I'd forgotten it was coming up. It'd never been one to make a fuss. Madison held out a drawing, carefully colored, showing two stick figures holding hands. One tall, one small. It's you and me. Grandma. I drew it in art class. My throat tightened. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you. Madison hugged me tight, then ran back to the car where Tyler was waving from his car seat. Ashley lingered. Brandon wanted to come too. But I told him to wait. I figured you wouldn't want to see him. That was thoughtful, I said neutrally. She looked at me for a long moment. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the garbage I sent in that letter months ago. I waited. I convinced myself that you were obligated to help us because you were Brandon's mother. That it was your job to support him, to make his life easier. I never thought about what it was costing you. I never cared. She swallowed hard. Losing everything, having to start over. It taught me things I should have learned a long time ago. Like humility. Like gratitude. Like how to say thank you. Thank you for what? I asked. For the college funds. For still letting us bring the kids to see you. For not completely destroying Brandon even though you could have. She blinked back tears. For teaching us, the hard way, that actions have consequences, that you can't just use people and expect them to keep coming back. I didn't know what to say. This was the first time Ashley had ever spoken to me like I was a person instead of an inconvenience. I don't expect us to be friends, Ashley continued. I don't even expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. What we did. How wrong it was. I'm sorry. She left before I could respond. I stood in my doorway, holding Madison's drawing, feeling something shift inside my chest. Maybe people could change. Maybe sometimes rock bottom was the only place to build from. Maybe there was hope after all. Or maybe not. Maybe this was just another manipulation. Another performance designed to get back in my good graces. Time would tell. But the difference now was that I didn't need to know. I didn't need them to change for me to be okay. I was okay regardless. I hung Madison's drawing on my refrigerator and finished making my dinner. Later, I called Patricia and told her about the unexpected visit. How do you feel? She asked. Cautious, I said. Hopeful, but careful. I'm not opening that door all the way. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can crack it open a little. See what happens. That's healthy. Patricia said. Boundaries with compassion. That night, I sat in my comfortable chair with my coffee and my view and thought about the journey I'd been on. From that humiliating moment at the Wellington to this quiet evening of peace, I thought about all the women in my support group, fighting their own battles against family members who saw them as resources instead of people. I thought about the young mother in the parking lot, clutching my card like a lifeline. I thought about every person who'd ever been told that love meant accepting abuse, that family meant tolerating mistreatment, that being a good person meant setting yourself on fire. And I thought about what I would say to them all if I could gather them together and share the hardest lesson I'd ever learned. Love is not measured by what you can give. It's not about sacrifice or suffering or endurance. Real love is mutual. It's respectful. It's about people who see your value and honor it, who treat you with kindness because you deserve kindness, who would never dream of making you feel small or worthless. If the people in your life make you feel bad about yourself, if they use guilt and manipulation to control you, if they measure your worth by your usefulness to them, that's not love. That's exploitation wrapped in the language of family obligation. You are valuable. You matter. You deserve respect and consideration and basic human decency. And if standing up for yourself costs you relationships, those relationships weren't worth having. The hardest thing I ever did was push that bill back across the table. Walk away from my son's humiliation and demands. Risk losing everything to preserve my own dignity. But it was also the most loving thing I ever did. For him. Because he needed to face consequences. And for myself. Because I finally learned that I was worth fighting for. I'm 69 years old. I spent most of my life believing my value came from what I could do for others. Now I know better. Now I know that I'm enough, just as I am. That my existence has value independent of my usefulness. That I deserve love that doesn't come with a price tag. And if I can learn this at 69, after nearly 7 decades of getting it wrong, then anyone can learn it. It's never too late to choose yourself. Never too late to set boundaries. Never too late to stand up and say, I matter, I deserve better, and I'm done accepting anything less. That restaurant bill, that moment of public humiliation, was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and also the best, because it forced me to finally see the truth, to stop making excuses, to stop enabling, to stop destroying myself for people who didn't value the gift I was giving. I was set free that night, free from obligation and guilt, and the crushing weight of trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Free to discover who I am without the constant pressure to give and sacrifice and martyr myself. And who I am, I've discovered, is pretty wonderful. I'm kind, I'm generous, I'm strong, I'm resilient, I'm worthy of love and respect and consideration, just like you are, just like everyone is. So if you're reading this, if you're living through something similar, if you're being used or manipulated or made to feel worthless by people who should cherish you, please hear this. You deserve better. You are enough. And the scariest thing you can do, standing up for yourself, might also be the most important thing you ever do. For them, but mostly for you. Because you matter. You always have. You always will. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to make a choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? Have you ever felt trapped between loyalty to family and loyalty to your own dignity? What did you choose, and how did it change your life? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, or made you think differently about boundaries and self-worth, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people facing real challenges and finding their way through. And share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's struggling to say no. Someone who's learned that love sometimes means walking away. Someone who needs permission to choose themselves. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are valuable, you are worthy, and you deserve love that lifts you up instead of tearing you down. Be kind to yourself. You deserve it.